and so it's great to come here and see so many people who care about books. I'm going to begin this talk by addressing 4 unwelcome questions that novelists are often asked in the course of an evening like this. Morning, sorry. They're difficult to answer, and therefore very much worth asking. The first of these perennial questions is, who are your influences? Sometimes the person asking this question merely wants some book recommendations, but all too often the question seems to be intended seriously. And what maddens the writer trying to answer the question honestly is that almost everything a writer has ever read leaves some kind of mark. To list every writer I've learned something from would take me hours, and it would still not answer the question of why some books matter to me so much more than other books. Why even now when I'm working I often think about War and Peace and The Great Gatsby and never think about Ulysses and To the Lighthouse. How did it happen that I did not learn anything from Joyce or Woolf, even though they're both very strong writers? With my new novel, I found new allies in Stendhal, Tolstoy, and Alice Munro. For a while, Philip Roth was my new bitter enemy, but lately, unexpectedly, he's become a friend as well. The second perennial question is, what time of day do you work, and what do you write on? This must seem to the people who ask it like the safest and politest of questions. I suspect it's the question people ask a writer when they can't think of anything else to ask. And yet to me it's the most disturbingly personal and invasive of questions. It forces me to picture myself sitting down at my computer every morning at 8 o'clock, to see objectively the person who, as he sits down at his computer in the morning, wants only to be a pure, invisible subjectivity. When I'm working, I don't want anybody else in the room, including myself. Question number 3 is, I read an interview with an author who says that at a certain point in writing a novel, the characters take over and tell him what to do. Does this happen to you too? This question always raises my blood pressure. When a writer makes a claim like Forster's, the best case scenario is that he's mistaken. More often, unfortunately, I get the sense of a writer who seems to be trying to aggrandize himself, trying to distance his own work from the mechanistic plotting of genre novels. The writer wants us to believe that unlike those hacks who can tell you in advance how their books are going to end, his imagination is so powerful and his characters so real and vivid that he has no control over them. The best case here, again, is that it isn't true. Which brings me to perennial question number 4. Is your fiction autobiographical? I'm suspicious of any novelist who would honestly answer no to this question, and yet my strong temptation when I'm asked it myself is to answer no. Of the 4 perennial questions, this is the one that always feels the most hostile. Maybe I'm just projecting that hostility, but I feel as if my powers of imagination are being challenged. As in, is this a true work of fiction or just a thinly disguised account of your own life? And since there are only so many things that can happen to you in your life, you're surely going to use up all of your autobiographical material soon, if indeed you haven't used it up already. And so you probably won't be writing any more good books, will you? In fact, if your books are just thinly disguised autobiography, maybe they weren't as interesting as we thought they were. Because after all, what makes your life so much more interesting than anybody else's? It's not as interesting as Barack Obama's life, is it? And also, for that matter, if your work is autobiographical, why didn't you do the honest thing and write a nonfiction account of it? Why dress it up in lies? What kind of bad person are you, telling us lies to try to make your life seem more interesting and dramatic? I hear all of these other questions in the question, and it has the effect of making the very word autobiographical feel shameful to me. My own novels are not. In 30 years, I don't think I've published more than 20 or 30 pages of scenes drawn directly from real-life scenes that I participated in. I've actually tried to write a lot more pages than that, but these scenes rarely seem to work in a novel. They embarrass me, or they don't seem interesting enough, or most frequently, they don't seem quite relevant to the story I'm trying to tell. The problem is that in another sense, my fiction is extremely autobiographical, and moreover, that I consider it my job as a writer to make it ever more so. My conception of a novel is that it ought to be a personal struggle, a direct and total engagement with the author's story of his or her own life. As a writer nowadays, you owe it to your readers to set yourself the most difficult challenge that you have some hope of being equal to. With every book, you have to dig as deep as possible and reach as far as possible. And if you do this and you succeed in producing a reasonably good book, it means that the next time you try to write a book, you're going to have to dig even deeper and reach even farther, or else, again, it won't be worth writing.